What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this week's episode of the ARC podcast. It's your host, Brandon Zachary, with my co-host, Matt Owens. Matt, how we doing today?
I can't complain, Brandon. Back again. Excited as ever, man.
Good. Yeah. We released a couple interviews, so now we're back, just Brandon and Matt again. So bear with us. We're going to have some fun conversations here tonight. Matt's coming back from the ABCA convention where he actually gave a presentation. So it'll be cool to kind of see the behind the scenes stuff that goes into that. So yeah, we're excited. We can get started on that. Matt, so can you give people that don't necessarily know, aren't super involved in the college game, on the most basic level, what is the ABCA convention?
Yeah, so the ABCA convention is a pretty cool place to be. It's like Christmas for coaches. Every January they have a convention. So ABCA is the American Baseball Coaches Association. It links coaches all the way up from the youth game, high school into college, all levels of college, and then professional baseball as well. So you kind of see a lot of different people, some of the big names, smaller names, everywhere, and everyone in between, kind of at the convention every single year. And they put on a bunch of different people, go up on stage, give presentations, and then they also have hot stove sessions where it's not filmed, but you get to go behind the scenes and just kind of hear some of the people in the game kind of talk about what they do from base running all the way up into like hitting, infield, everything of that nature. So it's a really cool place to be. It's great to further your education in the game and just kind of meet people, connect, network, and just overall learn and grow.
How many years now have you been going? Because I know you haven't presented every year you've gone. You've like gone as a coach, just kind of there to learn and kind of make connections and stuff like that. So how many years have you been going to the ABCA convention?
Yeah, so it's funny. This is my second year going. Last year I was able to be in the hot stove session for infield play, and then this year I got to present on the youth coaches session on the youth stage. And next year it's funny. I haven't been asked to do anything yet, but I would love to go learn, grow, and just kind of mosey around and just kind of it would be like a different side of things for me, because every year I've gone, I've been able fortunate, lucky enough to be able to do something while I've been there. So it would be kind of different, kind of cool to kind of be able to kind of sit back next year and just kind of watch and just grow.
Yeah, so you keep saying grow and like obviously educating yourself. I feel like the biggest purpose there, at least from the clips I've seen, I've never personally gone, but just from what I've seen, it's like a lot of coaches picking up on tips, drills, how their prep work is, and like taking some things that some coaches use and applying it for your own program and for yourself as a coach. So I guess my question for you is, what are some things this year that you kind of were able to come away with that maybe you didn't go in anticipating you were going to learn? Like, obviously a lot of the things are like, oh, here's a presentation on, like you said, base running. Here's a presentation on hitting. But like, what are some behind the scenes conversations that you had, or like maybe some cool one-on-one coaching things that you saw or heard while you were there that you were able to take away from the trip?
Yeah, for me, I think a lot of the things that I really look forward to is just learning more like organizational stuff from like a leadership aspect, just kind of growing like, hey, how to lead your team, hey, how to lead your coaching staff once you become a head coach, and overall how do you run your organization from a college level and everything. I think that's the most useful information that I had this year as a takeaway and everything. But I think the cool thing there is they run so many different sessions. You're able to kind of put yourself in a lot of different rooms, and you get to pick and choose, because there's always stuff running at the same time. So I put myself more in spaces where I was going to learn a lot more about like the leadership, the coach's side, the organizational side of things, rather than anything else. Last year being my first year, I was trying to run around like chicken head cut off and everything like that, hitting every single session I could. I'm like, oh, there's like 5 seconds left in this other session. Let me run down the alley real quick and go to this next place or whatnot. And this year was kind of more like I planned it out. I was like, all right, I'm gonna go here. This is who I want to hear speak. This is what kind of want to take away from this and everything like that.
Yeah. So definitely a lot of cool tips, tricks, lessons learned. Like you said, organizational skills seem to be the biggest thing for you, at least from this kind of trip. So my question here is, you listen to those coaches and kind of like what we talked about when we went through like the independent ball tryout thing. So like obviously you're talking to coaches at all different levels, and just because a coach is at a big Division 1 school doesn't necessarily mean that their organizational skills, their drills, their tips are any better than anyone from any other level. So my question for you is, how do you filter out some of those tips and tricks that you like hear or see that you're kind of like, maybe that's not really that transferable to my guys, or like value wise, maybe your coaching staff just doesn't see eye to eye with that. How do you go about filtering that? Because I would imagine, especially as a younger coach, you see someone that may have success and you're like, I'm going to replicate that. But that's not necessarily going to translate to your team, your group of players. Like everyone's different. Maybe doesn't fit your guys' personalities or whatever. But how do you go about like filtering this information I want to take? This is information that even though it might be good info, I don't really need to apply it to my specific situation. How do you go about like filtering that and then communicating that with like your coaching staff?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is just kind of like knowing what you need. Everyone goes there, like I'm sure everyone goes there, like the want is to learn something or have a takeaway. One of the best pieces of advice I got, years before I actually started going to one of these was learn everything you can. And then, you can take it down and be like, hey, could I use this? Maybe I don't agree with it. Or, maybe you need to further educate yourself on why it works for this guy. But learn everything you can. That way you know what's good and what's bad. The best, it goes hand in hand. Like the best advice I learned about hitting was learn everything about hitting. Because there's some people out there that don't know anything about hitting, and there's some people that know everything about hitting, and they're really good hitting coaches. Well, you need to know the bad so you know what you don't want to do and what you shouldn't do, and then you should know the good because that's really what you kind of want to get to, right? So, that's kind of the biggest thing. And, when it comes to taking it back to, a coaching staff, right, like you got to know where you're at. Like you can't really learn something in January and be like, we're going to implement this right now. You just had a fall, especially at the college level. You just had a fall, so it's no real time for like implementation on a lot of different things. If it's something small, yeah, sure. But like if it's something like big, like you learned something from, let's say Wright State's really good base running school, and you're like, hey, I'm going to overhaul our entire base running system to be like Wright State because they have success. Like it's not going to work. Like there's a lot of different things that it takes to implement something like that and everything like that. So you just kind of have to filter out, what you need and what you can do, and then just kind of like take a look and be like, hey, maybe something small, maybe it might help one or two players. It might not help your entire team once you do it then, but like, years down the road or maybe months down the road as you go into a new fall or you go into a new team, you go into a new season, that's when you kind of look and be like, okay, look back at my notes from 2021, look back at my notes from 2022 and be like, hey, maybe I could add this time around and everything.
Yeah, I feel like this convention is like really cool because you get the face-to-face opportunities to hear people in person, and like you can have questions that can get answered on the spot. And I feel like, social media and the internet has been a great tool for players to like learn things. And like you said, with like taking tips and tricks from coaches that you hear and it's like, maybe this can work for us, maybe it can't. Like a lot of stuff that works and doesn't work for players, you have to go through that trial and error period. Like you can go on Instagram and look up all these pitching and hitting drills and like, maybe 1 out of 10 works, but you have to almost give it a try, or at least in your head be like, all right, well, what would this look like if I tried to implement this? Is this something that's going to improve my game, or is it just like, am I buying into something because, like you said, it works for them and it might not work for my program? So I feel like the ABCA is kind of cool because it's everything that you see from social media in one place that you can now, use your voice to be like, Hey, I had a quick question about this, or be like, do you have any recommendations on how you'd like implement this at a smaller level?
Right.
Because like you were saying, there were some awesome coaches like from some really cool schools that are there.
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I could be a fanboy at some points in time too. And yeah, I was in the hall and I ran into Coach Jackson from Mizzou and everything.
Yeah,
And yeah, we were talking, and Tony V was there from Tennessee, and so
yeah,
I got to shake Tony V's hand and everything,
yeah,
and congratulate him, which I'm sure he's heard a million and ten
yeah,
times
yeah. Of
already
course. Yeah,
from different people. But it was cool, being able to be a fan in June, sit back, watch that, and everything, and kind of get to meet the person who kind of like helped mastermind that. It's cool stuff like
yeah,
that. Granted, I didn't have a conversation like with them, but it was kind of like in
yeah,
passing. It's something like that. But yeah, no, I think the best part about it is not only seeing those people, but like it's an opportunity. Like they're putting themselves out in public to be there, and like if you're out in public and you're there, like go up to someone, like shake their hand, talk to
yeah,
them, like pick their brain, and like most people, they might be intimidating because of like the school behind, but like at the end of the day, they got their start just like you did at some school, somewhere, and like they grew up in the game as well. So it's just like they're just a further along in their journey, right? Rather than where you might be at that point in time. So like they don't care if you go up and like have a conversation, like talk to them and everything like that. I think the best thing that happened, like the true growth really that happens after is like if you make that connection, you get a phone number and you
yeah.
can like give that coach a call and be like, hey, I saw you guys did this. What do you think about this? Hey, I got this going on at my school. What do you think about this? And kind of pick a brain and just kind of go back and forth and everything.
Yeah. So you brought up Tony V. Obviously, I feel like he's one of the most like famous college coaches now. Obviously, because of the success and like he's a fiery guy and like gets his team going. He gets them motivated. So like you saw Tennessee. You mentioned. I think you said the
Mizzou.
Mizzou coach. Like a bunch of really successful programs are there and programs that win. So when you see like the coaches from those schools, did you see any like similarities in characteristics or like just energy levels? Like obviously you might not have had one-on-one time with all of these coaches, and like you said, your conversation with Tony V might have been, a few minutes and it wasn't anything groundbreaking, but just kind of, chatting real quick. But obviously people give off a certain energy. You see the way they move at these things, you see the way that they speak. Did you see any like, I don't know, similarities between some of the guys that have success on their teams and on the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the times it's like it's just how they carry themselves. Honestly, like they're just
Yeah,
people at the end of the day.
of course.
I think the coolest thing was just like they were just in the middle of the hallway having a conversation, and the cool thing ABCA does is like the first presentation of every year is the Division I head coach that won the national championship. So last year was Jay Johnson. And kind of walking in the halls after his presentation, like you even see guys that are like Division I head coaches, from Power Five to mid major, they're like going up and talking to him and everything like
Yeah.
that. So it's like, they're all just kind of like down to earth guys. They just want to have a conversation. They all want what's best for, the 35, 60 guys that they have in their program, and they just all want to win and do it the right way and kind of grow young men, young women into like leaders at the end of the day. And I think that's kind of like the biggest thing, because I think being like a younger guy, and especially being new to it last year, just kind of walking in, that was kind of one thing I wanted to like see, like, hey, how do they walk the walk? Hey, how do they talk the talk, right?
Yeah.
And like at the end of the day, if you just like put yourself around them, like you realize like this isn't that different than anything
Of
else,
course.
right? It's
Yeah.
just they're just down to earth. They're just like in front of the camera at the end of the day because they're playing a higher level or coaching at a higher level and everything like that. So you kind of have to get familiar with them. They're in your face because they're on ESPN every May and
Yep.
June, July. So it's like it's one of those things. But they're the most down to earth people, man, and like it was. It's always a cool experience and everything.
Yeah, and I feel like the conversations that you said they have afterward where they're just like conversing with people and like obviously they're still there to learn things. Like I feel like that's a big thing that you and I have talked about, where like they're just genuine people that do want to keep improving their program. And even though like Tennessee won the national championship last year, I'm sure Tony V took notes and like understood what was going on in that like convention. You know what I mean? Like he's going around and trying to pull things that he can improve on in his program, because obviously no program's perfect, and especially year to year, like a big school like that, you lose a lot of guys to the draft. Now, like the transfer portal's getting much larger, so you're losing a lot of guys to that. I feel like that constant search to keep growing is something that a lot of those big time coaches like continually go after year. You know, like
Yeah.
just the level of attention to detail and attention to what's going on around them, like, and understanding like their conversations with people at that convention, can one help you, and two, maybe they pull something away from the conversation that they had with you that they just didn't even think they were going to come away with. So that's awesome that like they're all there and they seem like genuine guys. That's a cool takeaway to have. That's cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the ARC podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Philly Pretzel Factory of Marlton, located on North Maple Ave in Marlton, New Jersey.
Tell them Matt and Brandon sent you. We appreciate all your support. Thank you for listening, and back to the podcast.
We went into the ABCA advertisement there and went into like talking about how the convention is, what it is, stuff like that. So now we can lean more into you and your actual presentation while you were there. So you obviously presented to the youth coaching session, and how was that presented to you? Like, how did that opportunity come about?
Yeah, it's a wild, I guess. It was 2 years in the making, maybe, I think, somewhere along the line. So I actually had a really awesome opportunity to work in November 2022, I believe it was, to come up to Philadelphia. I was down in Norfolk State at the time. I come up, work a kids and coaches clinic for the ABCA in Philadelphia. So I did that clinic. It's pretty much a bunch of like college coaches in the area or from like HBCUs at the time. And you're working on, just showing coaches in the area, youth coaches, like, hey, like these are some of the drills that we do. Hey, these are some tips that we would say, like how to coach up like young kids. And and then that transitioned into an actual like kids clinic at the field house over in Philadelphia. And so you got a chance to work with those kids. And, through that I met Ryan Brownlee, who runs a lot of stuff at the ABCA and everything. He does a lot of the events, does a lot of the clinics. If not all of them, I feel like he's all over the place every time I see him. He's the man. And Coach Brownlee and I, hit it off, had a good relationship and everything. And, down in Virginia that year, I was actually supposed to do the hot stove. I wasn't able to make it down to Tennessee at that point in time. And so, I was like, hey, I would love to do this next year if it's available. And so, turns out it became available through the hot stove, last year out in Dallas at the 2024 ABCA. And then for 2025, they had me come and do the youth session, the youth coaches stage. And that was an amazing experience, man. Like I love sharing, talking, baseball with anybody and everything. And, we got our start, me and you, we both got our start in working with kids. So like, I think that's always been like the essence and everything like that. So it's always a great time to be able to do that. And they had some young guys out there, in the crowd and everything. So it was cool to get to talk with like the kids and everything. See who their favorite ball player is, who their favorite team is and everything. Have them talk themselves up like they're the best shortstop. And so it was awesome. It was just an awesome overall experience. But yeah, that's kind of how I ended up getting it.
So then you get told and you understand, like, all right, I'm going to go up and present. Now, how do you prepare for something like that? Because I know on my end, I would be, a nervous wreck going into something like that. Like, obviously, something you love to talk about and you're passionate about. So obviously, it was going to turn out awesome. Like, we had no doubt about that. But how do you go into, like, mental prep for that? And then just overall, like, organizational prep of, all right, this is how I want to start it. This is how I want to, focus on it in the middle. And this is how I want to end the presentation type of thing.
Yeah, I actually, so kind of I guess a longer answer here. Will Kaufman, he's a coach up at Bryant. When he was down at UPenn, he was in our area, and he introduced me to ABCA, and he was like, "Hey, like if you're not a member, you need to become a member. Like this is how you learn, this is how you grow, and everything like that." I was like, "Okay, cool." So like, by the time I was able to like afford it, after a couple of years and whatnot, I purchased a membership, and they have all the videos, all their conventions, all the youth stages. And so, one of the things I did, I was like, kept a notebook, and I was like, I'm gonna watch a couple videos per week and just kind of like take notes. But like in that, you kind of get to see like how those guys have stage presence, how they go about presenting and everything like that. And one of the key guys that I got connected through from the Anderson Monarchs was Andre Butler. Andre Butler runs Graveyard Mentality, and he's all over the country teaching guys outfield and everything like that, life lessons amongst the better things as well. He's an awesome guy, man. I got nothing but great things to say about Andre. And Andre, he was able to be on the stage before, and last year before I did the hot stove, I talked to him a little bit. I was like, hey, like it's my first time doing something like this. I'm like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What do you think? Any advice you have for me? And he was like, if you do get to the stage, it's going to be a little bit different than doing like the hot stove. And he was just like, hey, like you do this, like this is what your job is, right? Like, so like,
Yep.
Just imagine you're talking to your players. And I was like, that's probably the best advice someone could give you in that realm. Right. So like, this year when I was going through making all the stuff, I was pretty much just like, I'm going to teach it to the audience like I would teach it to a player, right? And so ABCA, they do a great job of just kind of getting you on track, keeping you in line when it comes to preparing for that. So they give you you do a handout. They published a handout in like the book they put out for like the whole convention and everything like that. Yep. And so like in there it shows like, hey, what your presentation is going to be on and everything like that. But that kind of gives you the guide and the framework of like what it's going to look like and everything. Okay. And so for me, being able to have access to the Anderson Monarchs and, guys like that, and, I was able to go in and, I got all my video working with my guys and everything. And so I was able to have them be the stars of the show, because coaches, they don't care much about what you got to say once you're on stage. They're like, cool, show some video, right? So like, you get to show the video and like see what it looks like and everything. And like they're not perfect, man. Like they're going into high school. I had some guys that were not in high school yet. I have some guys young in their stages of high school. I had two college commits in the video as well. So you kind of get to see like what it's going to look like step by step as they kind of get further along and everything like that. And granted, like, you get to a point, you're going to have the ninth grader for longer than you might have. I got involved last year, so my seniors I've only had for 2 years. My ninth grader I'll have for 4 years, right? So it's going to look a lot different 2 years from now when that guy gets there. But I was able to have those guys in the video and everything. It really just kind of captures, the work that you put in with them and everything. And, at Anderson, they do a phenomenal job. So it's not just myself working with infielders. We have a ton of other coaches that work with all of our guys on a daily basis. So like it was great to, be able to have those guys in it because like those are my guys too. Like I love them to death. I learn from them as well, right? So like they were able to help me out. I get to help out the kids and everything like that. So it was a great time, and it was a great being able to piece all that stuff together and everything.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome experience, and it feels like your preparation for that was not just like the week of. It's something obviously that you've been working on for an extended period of time. So now I do think that's great advice. Like, this is what you do. It's not like you have to come up with this whole presentation. Like, no. You're presenting on something that you have been doing for an extended period of time. So now it's just showcasing that on stage. Like nothing changes type of thing. So where does your confidence in accepting that presentation role come from? Because like, I'm sure a lot of coaches, especially younger coaches, are thinking like, man, am I ready for this? Like, am I at this point in my coaching career yet that I can go up and present to other coaches? Because like there's, a little bit of self-doubt potentially? Like, where does your confidence come from where you're like, I want to do it, one, I'm ready to do it, two, and three, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to basically share with everyone my philosophies, learnings, and teachings. Because, like, from the outsider looking in, that takes a level of confidence. Because, again, like, you can go in there and it's the same thing. Like, if I'm making a pitching program, it's like, well, what are, the thought comes in and leaks into your mind. Like, what are these people going to think? Like, how can I show that this is the right way to do something, And there's like 8,000 different ways to do one thing. So where does your confidence come from? And like, all right, I'm ready to present. I'm going to kill this presentation. And like, I'm excited to show my learnings and teachings and give it to people.
Yeah, one from faith. That's kind of the biggest thing I put over everything. But I think the thing for me is just like they offered it to me, and I'm like, okay, well, if you feel I'm ready, like,
yep,
who am I to be like, nah, I don't think I'm ready, like, right? So like they were like, hey, you want to do this? I'm like, yes. I think the coolest thing, going and watching presentations last year, watch them years on my laptop and everything. It's just like you get to see that coach put on the uniform, get up on stage, and they get to just like do their thing, right? And so for me, it was something that like early on, like I had my goal book, and 2 years ago I wrote like present on stage at the ABCA, and like that was one of my goals fulfilled and everything like that. And it was cool awesome. Because it's the beginning of the year, and probably December 30th, I'm in here, I'm like looking at my goal book, and I'm like, okay, like I had goals from 2022 to 2025, and so I'm like, all right, I got these 3 knocked off, but I was like, all right, well, I'm not even going to check off the 4th one until after I get off stage on Friday. Went back to the hotel room, and I was able to like check it off. So like it was a goal of mine, so I was just like, all right, like if this is a goal of mine, I'm also telling myself then that like, hey, I'm ready for something that would come along, right? So I get the opportunity to go up there after I wrote it down as a goal, right? So like I had a lot of confidence. I was like, I'm gonna keep working. And then also at the end of the day, like, if they offer it to you and you say no, like that might not come around again. So for me, I put a lot of value into it being like a once in a lifetime opportunity for myself. I might never get that chance again. Who knows? Maybe 5 years they call me and do it again. I'll do it again, right? But like, for where I was at that point in time, I'm like, I might never get to do this again. I was like, this is so cool. And like, for me, it's always been about like, sharing information, helping as many people as I possibly can. And, so if people are up there and they're like, hey, this is BS, it's bogus, right? Like if 2 people take away from it and they're like, hey, this is good, I'm like, cool, I'm sold. Like, I'm good, man. Like it's perfectly fine. And like, honestly, I said it on stage, and, I'm glad you kind of said it, like there's 8,000 different ways to do things. And I keep telling people, like, there's not one way to skin a cat, right? Like, there's a lot of different ways to do a lot of different things. And, I think in the video also, it's like a lot of those guys aren't polished yet, right? So I'm not running out here with Derek Jeter, Francisco Lindor, Alex Rodriguez, and like rolling them ground balls where like they're going to vacuum everything up. Every throw is going to be crisp and everything like that. And like I did I rolled a video of our guys throwing, and they're missing a target. And I'm like, like this guy's in 9th grade. Yeah, he just missed a target 3 times, and here's why, and this is what we're going to work on, when we get back and everything. Then we have another guy who hits the target every single time, but he crosses over on all his throws. I'm like, hey, like he crosses over on all his throws, but like, are you as a coach going to fix that if it just looks wrong, but it's effective, right? So like, for me, I'm like, I'm not going to do it, right? So it's like, it's a way to sit there also and be like very authentic, honestly, at the end of the day. And like, if I'm not going to change something, I'm going to let you know on stage, like, because someone could roll the video and be like, this is the wrong way to do it. Well, I told you in front of everybody, hey, I ain't going to do nothing about it, right? So I think that's the thing, and that's kind of where that confidence comes from to do that, right? Like, you just got to know yourself. And I just thought, it's one of those things where I'm like, man, I couldn't wait to do it. I got an opportunity to do it. I did it, and I'm like, cool, this is great.
Yeah, I think you brought up a cool point about like, one, you said like the same thing I said with the 8,000 different ways to do it. And like, you're like, it may not look a certain way, but like if it works and it's effective, I'm not gonna be the one to be like, let's completely rehaul this and make this something that it's not. And I feel like the biggest thing with like the ABCA convention, and this is coming from someone that hasn't been there, but like if you think that your coaching way is the only way that's gonna succeed and do something, then I feel like that's comes from an insecurity on your part, and you're too stubborn to realize like, you and I have been around coaches that are like, nope, that's not the way to do it. That's not
Right.
a good program. That's not whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's a reason that there's so many different coaches, colleges, throwing programs, hitting programs, whatever it is that are successful. Like there are so many different approaches that if you can take one thing away from somebody when you're there, like that's a win for the whole week. Like
Absolutely.
you got to go in there with an open mind. It's the same thing as a player, man. Like if you see something works for somebody, maybe you're like, I tried that and I can't do that, and it's like, okay, great, you learned quick. But then it's like, all right, you see something else from somebody, and you're like, that kind of looks a little bit funky, but like they're getting what it's from like a pitching lens. Like that looks a little funky, but they're getting swings and misses with doing it a certain way, or like maybe in practice they're doing something that you're like, what is that? And then you do it and you get the feeling that you want to replicate on the mound, and you're like, oh my gosh, this was here the whole time. Like you have to keep an open mind. And also, like we said before, you don't have to accept every single thing that someone says, because it's not one size fits all. If you can just take pieces that work for you, that's where you're going to be the best coach, player, person that you can be, to be
Absolutely.
honest. Like
Yeah.
that's how you're going to grow and get better.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's like anything in life, honestly. Like, if something works for you, but I have nothing in my toolkit to get that done, why am I going to try to like create something that you do, and I know I don't have the facilities or the ability to get it done, right? And like that's the thing. It's if you're willing to put yourself like in that room, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get a lot of people with a lot of different opinions, probably that differ from yours. Like, you can approach it like a coffee bean and try to grow from it, or you can sit there and be like, nah, I don't like that. My way's the best. It's like, all right, well, cool. Like, why'd you come then? Right? So it's one of those things.
Yeah, I feel like just the takeaways that you can get, like the knowledge that's there, if you go in there with that stubborn attitude, it's like you went there for no purpose besides just to show that your college went there. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Yeah.
there's so much room to grow. So now that I'm thinking about it, like you're a younger coach, and I feel like I don't know the audience that was at the youth coaching session. Like I'm assuming there was various ages of people, like older coaches, younger coaches. Like you said, there were some players there and stuff like that. So how do you go about conversing with like a coach that is older than you or more tenured than you, and like not necessarily teaching them something, but maybe going over your thought process and philosophy? Because like, you and I have been around some coaches that are like maybe older, or maybe because we're a certain age, it's like, I'm not listening to that kid. He's younger than me. You know what I mean? Like, how do you navigate that? And obviously, like, in the long term, those aren't the people you want to be around. But, like, I'm sure when you're giving a presentation, you see coaches in the stands, and you probably know, like, all right, that guy didn't take away anything. He's just like, this is a stupid presentation. I'm just sitting here, whatever. How do you navigate that in your head? Because I feel like for a lot of people, they probably would be like, how do I get through to that guy? You know what I mean? Like I feel like you brought it up and had the right mindset of like, if I can touch two people and they can come away with something that's like, this is cool, this is great, I can apply this to my philosophy, my hitting, whatever it is. It's like, all right, great, cool, that's great. But like, how do you navigate talking to coaches that you're like, you're clearly not listening to a word that I say? But there's also like that respect level where you're not going to be like talking and then you're going to be like, all right, I'm going to see you later. I know you're not listening to a word that I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like, how do you navigate that?
I mean, I personally don't think it's too tough, honestly. I just think it's like, you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know, right? So like
Yep.
at the end of the day, like if something I say, like somebody doesn't agree with it and like they have a rebuttal, like I'm all ears. Like maybe I learned something out of that, even though they're like putting the hand up, they're stopping me at the door, right? Like but like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
on the flip like of that, it's like they could probably teach me something too, like
Of
right? Like
course.
I think
Yep.
I think the most humble thing, you know, for me, and like it's just that like I know even though I'm giving a presentation, there's probably someone out there that's better than me at what I'm doing, and they probably
Yep.
knows more than me about what I'm presenting on. So
Yep.
it's like at the end of the day, I don't know who that person is. I don't know when they come through the door. I don't
Of
know if that's
course.
the one that's going to ask me the question. You know, so I
You
think
don't
at
know
the
how
end
they
of the day,
present.
right?
You don't know what they look like, who they are. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I mean, because it's, I love public speaking, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, I think if I was half the public speaker I am, I don't think I also get the opportunity to go up there and talk, right? So, like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, there might be somebody with absolutely no public speaking skills, but knows way more than I do about what I'm presenting on, and they just
Yeah.
aren't good at conveying that, right? So, like, I don't know who that person is. So, like, if they ask me a question or they stop me at the door with in terms of conversation, like, I mean, I might be learning from the guy that's better than me, right? So like
Yeah.
like how I approach this is pretty much just like, hey, like if we're going to have a conversation, it's going to be a two-way street, right? Like it could be one way for that person, but for me, it's going to be two ways. Like they could teach me something, I'm just going to tell them what I just presented on and everything like that. So the cat's out the bag for me, So
Yeah.
it's up to them if they want to like contribute or share something or tell me I'm doing it wrong because I might be, or they might be like, hey,
Yeah.
you're doing it
Yeah.
wrong. I do it this way, and that might help me, right? So
Yep.
it's for me, it's not too difficult just because like I do truly subscribe to like trying to learn everything I possibly can so that I could be like, I don't like that. I'm not going to do that. Or, hey, I can't do
Yep.
that. I'm just not going to use it. Right. So like just try to learn as much as possible. And I think that's kind of what helps me navigate through that and everything.
So you brought up like the public speaking aspect of like maybe some people aren't as either comfortable or just frankly aren't as skilled at public speaking as other coaches. So you obviously have a background in communications. So public speaking for you, I feel like would come a little bit more natural than maybe some of the other coaches that don't have that.
Right.
So with your communication background, can you give like some advice to maybe some coaches that didn't have that specific background of like, all right, you're going to present in front of people. Like, what's some of your comm degree that comes out that you can kind of help out and give a little piece of advice to some young coaches?
Yeah, well, I love communications. That was so. I mean, I had a really good public speaking teacher my sophomore year at Chestnut Hill. One of the things that she did a really good job of was, what you're going to present on is like you own it, right? Like you own every word that comes
Yeah.
out your mouth. You own it, right? So like whether you have to find pretty much like what would kind of turn you back when you present, like because some people it's
Yeah.
making eye contact, like they see a face and they're like maybe it's that coach that's just like I'm not feeling this, right? Like they
Yeah,
might be
yeah,
making
yeah.
a
Okay.
face, so like it's you can identify people in the crowd and like there's a bunch of different techniques. I use a bunch of different techniques. Like some people just stare at the lights, some people look above the heads and everything like that. Like
Yeah.
all the guys at Chestnut Hill, they're like, oh man, I got my senior sem presentation. I'm like, dude, just look at the top of the head, like, or just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
look
yeah.
right above them because it looks like you're making eye contact as long as you're like scanning the room and like
Yeah.
you're not. And like once you do it enough, you get to the point where it's just like you'll find faces in the crowd and like kind of see like how it hits, how it lands, and everything like that. And then like if that
Yeah.
person's not doing it and like like hey, like, I like to. I'm active. You see me right now. I'm talking with my hands, right? So like
Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
like I'm presenting on stage and like I'm talking, I'm trying to like actually like I'm looking across like the room trying to find faces and everything like that. Whether they are friendly or unfriendly or anything like that. It's just how I it's just how I operate and like
Yeah.
So I guess the biggest tip would just be like, hey, don't even look them in the face. Like look at the forehead, look at the top of the head, like look above the head and everything like that. And if you're on stage where people can't really see where your eyes are looking for the most part, look at the lights because the lights
Yeah,
are
yeah.
above everybody and they might not be too high, but also like you're not seeing anything. So like you're also
Yeah.
just kind of then going off like what's in your head and everything like that. But also like if you're presenting and you have a presentation, like you know the material,
Yeah.
so it's a lot easier then to kind of like you're not going to lose your train of thought because like you put it together, like you actually teach it, like you actually have done this numerous times. So it's like you're going in there and like you're armed to the teeth, you got everything you need. So like you just go up and you're just talking at that point. That's kind of the biggest thing. Like if you own it, avoid getting into that trap of like seeing somebody's face, because some people just have furrowed brow, frown all the time, but like
Yeah,
they
of
might be
course.
the one to come up to you after and be like, "Yo, that was a great job." Like you're mean mugging me the whole time. Like
Yeah,
you might
what
hate
the
it.
heck?
So like yeah,
Yeah.
so like don't fall for like the facial like trap or anything like that. Just making sure that like you're just getting off what you need to get off about the presentation and everything, and just you own it, right? So just speak, talk, and like try not to get too caught up in anything, because there's people in the room. So like you can always just look at somebody else, look at something else, or anything like that.
Okay, so now in this scenario, let's step away from you're done presenting now, and now you presented relatively early in the weekend, correct?
Yeah.
Was it the Saturday morning?
So Friday morning at I think it was 10:50.
Got it. Okay, so Friday morning there, like obviously you're done that, and you're like, wow, this is a big. Not even I don't want to say weight off your shoulder, but like it's something that you were prepping for a lot, planning, and took a lot of mental energy to kind of get where you want to be. So now I know you and I know how you approach the ABCA. So how do you then be done with the presentation, exert all that mental energy, and then go, okay, I may be mentally exhausted, but I know the best thing for me in my development right now is going to be going around and hearing other presentations, going around networking and, seeing people that I've already networked with previously. How do you get the energy to then be like, all right back on the grind? Like, I just went from presenting, but now I'm going to go learn and get myself better.
Yeah, it's cool. Like they do a really good job, kind of making that like shift for you, whether you know it or not, right?
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
there's a lot of ways like people would tell you like, hey, this is how you kind of like shed skin a little bit.
Okay.
They have you switch rooms. You go to a Q&A. So then you do a Q&A on your presentation. You leave there, and you're still in your uniform. So like you can do anything if you want. Like you can
Yeah.
be that guy that's going to be in your uniform, like writing notes down in the room, or
Yeah.
like for me, it's changing clothes. Like for me, I'll go back to the
Yeah.
hotel room, change my clothes and everything like that. Like, you know, then you go back out. And like for me, like I carry around notebook whenever I'm there and everything, my backpack. Always
Yeah.
have to have a coffee in hand. If it's like if there's no coffee in hand, then I'm done. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like I had 2 coffees in my backpack, took them with me, went into the next place, like cracked open a coffee, just started drinking it, and was like, all right, like what's
I'm
next? Because
back.
it's done
Yeah.
with, right? Like it's
Yeah.
done. So like for me, I'm like, yeah, I'm very meticulous in how I kind of go about things. So like the night before, it's like the first day of school, man. Like you put out the uni, like you get
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah.
But like for me, like whenever I'm going to a convention or if I'm going to some place where there's multiple layers to it, like I always get there and like the first thing I do is like lay out my outfits and everything.
Yeah.
It just eliminates the thought process, but also it's like once you change clothes, like you're almost like a different person. It's like Clark Kent, Superman, back to
Yes.
Clark Kent, right? So it's like, if I'm doing my job in the uniform, that's my presentation. Once that uniform's off, my weekend is done with presentation,
Yeah.
like with presenting. So I'm just like switching to jeans, shirt. I'm good to go. I'm out the next day. Now I'm back to like student, learn, like
Yes.
that aspect and everything like that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of honestly how I did it.
You brought up I was going to ask this question, but you kind of answered it. Because you brought up the uniform thing. You're like, I got to change out my uniform right after. And I feel like a lot of people feel like this during when they play or when they coach, where it's like, once the jersey's on, you're now player, coach, whatever it is. If you've ever, there's a book called The Alter Ego Effect. And a lot of athletes kind of embody that. Like George Kittle talks about it a lot, where he like gets his jersey on, then he gets his tape on, and he said his alter ego on the field is kind of like the Joker, which is like just a crazy mindset to have. But he's like, off the field, he's George, and he can be himself. On the field, he's the Joker, the guy that you see that, blocks someone for 10 yards and puts them on the ground and starts laughing on you could see on TV. Like
Yeah.
just a different person. And like I feel like you and I had that. Like I'm very different on field than I am off field. You're very different on field than you are off field.
Right.
So I think that would also be good advice for someone too. It's like it may sound stupid, but view that jersey as like, okay, maybe I'm scared to present this as, in my case, Brandon, the normal person off the field. But once that jersey comes on, like I'm a different person and I'm going to go up there and I'm going to do my thing that I know how to do.
Right.
So I feel like there's a lot of value in that. And like you said, even the other way, the opposite, not necessarily like this jersey means now it's game time. And then you're like, oh, now I'm in the street clothes. It's all gone. But you're like, okay, jersey is I'm Superman where this is game day. I'm ready to go. I'm going to present. I'm going to kill it. And then, all right, now I have to shift into Clark Kent, which will be me learning. Now you went from Coach Owens to Matt Owens, the person who wants to learn. And I feel like that's a really good piece of advice for anyone, not just doing a presentation, but doing almost anything in sport. I feel like there is value to that. It's finding that. It also keeps you sane because if you were just going to go present in street clothes and you're Matt Owens the whole time, like there's no room for anything else. And we kind of had that takeaway with DC too. He's like, once I get to the field and I'm out in center field and I'm doing my thing, like it's game time and I'm ready to go ball out. But off the field, it's like he's Donovan, who's father, who's husband, who's friend, like way different. So I feel like there's a lot of value in being like, this is my jersey that I'm going to present in. Let's do this thing. Now let's take it off. I'm done with that. That's in the past. And now I can go learn and be Matt Owens, like young coach who just wants to keep grinding and learning at this convention.
Absolutely. Like that. Honestly, it's like after a game too, like you coach,
Yep.
take the uni off, game's over. Win, lose, draw, right? Like you're done. Like your day is done. Work is done for that day. Like, be you. Be leisure. Be a father. Be a friend. Like, do something, right? Like, just don't sit there and like, once that thing's done, it's no longer what you're on like anymore. Just put it away. Move on.
So then we talked about it, but it's a mentally exhausting weekend, whether you want to admit it or not as a coach. Like, it's a lot going on. You're learning a lot. Like, it's just, you're basically in school for the whole weekend.
Yeah.
Like, you're just learning things that you're interested in and want to get better at. But, like, how do you find the time to, like, take a second, debrief everything, maybe rest? Like, how do you value in, like, almost recovering from that mentally and then being like, all right, back at it tomorrow? Or even after the weekend where, like, obviously you still have your coaching duties you got to do when you go home. It's not like it's like, all right, this was my event for the winter, I'm done. Like, you got to go home and you're Coach Owens still. You still got to do your job. How do you find the time to, like, debrief that, like, relax a little bit, be like, all right, I need to mentally recover from this so then I can be the best version of myself? Because if you're on repeat, like, I'm sure you need at least a little bit of time to recover from that and, like, go back to doing your daily stuff.
For me, like, after the weekend's done, like, I'm pretty much right back to work. So it's like, I have a job outside coaching too. So like I mean, obviously, but people listening might not know that. So it's like, once I check in, I'm like, all right, it's over. Like, it's done. We're on to this, man. Like, we're on to the week. I keep a weekly planner and everything like that. So once that page is flipped, I'm out of it. Like, I'm done with it. So like, for me, that's something that helps me. While you're there and everything, like, my parents helped put me into this, right? Like, they helped me get into coaching. They really helped support me early on in, like, my coaching career, being supportive whether that be monetarily for a couple things, gas
Yeah.
here and there, or whether that just
Yeah.
be like emotionally and like just be like, hey, like if this is something you want to do, like we support 100%, right? So like, for me being there, also another way to kind of like flip the page for me was like, they're like they're not going to be there. They can't. They didn't want to. They're not going to pay for it and like watch it or anything like that. But like the phone calls after, be like, hey, this is how this went. Blah blah blah. Get it over with.
Yeah.
Call. Hey, this is how this went. Once that phone call, click end. Good to go. Like it's done, right? Like I'm very quick to kind of flip pages on things. So it's like once that was done, I'm like, all right, cool. Like
On to
that
the
felt
next
like
thing.
that felt like the thing. Like I did the presentation, and Saturday, as I'm getting ready to like pack up, leave on Sunday and everything like that. Call the folks, boom, done. All right, weekend ended. Now I just got to punch in the GPS, get back home, and I got work tomorrow, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Of course.
but yeah, I think for me, like ending the chapter in some way, somehow, like that was also me like giving thanks to the people that helped get me there and everything like
Yeah.
that. Obviously the journey keeps going because you got to season the coach and everything like that. But like for that moment, just like giving your thank yous to like the people that helped put you on that stage, help impact your career and everything. Like that was something that kind of like helped end that chapter for me and everything like that.
Yeah. So with this presentation now, like I'm right to assume that this presentation was bigger than the last year's one.
For me,
Yes.
yeah. So like last year, like when I did the hot stove, it's a
Yeah.
room, it's a bunch of different coaches, and we're all kind of
Yep.
talking. Like this one's just you solo up there, and then yeah. So yep.
So yeah. So this one obviously is like a bigger presentation, and obviously there's a lot of lessons learned and stuff like that. So what can you take away, and how do you think this is going to help you in the future, not just coaching wise, but like personally as well? Like, what are some takeaways that you got from the presentation itself? Because obviously, like the ABCA, you could probably go on forever with different takeaways that you got, and you talked about like earlier the organizational skills, but now specifically the presentation, your presentation. What can you take away with that? What do you think it can help you with both professionally and personally moving forward?
Yeah, I think I really enjoyed the process of getting to the point where you get to present because there's like I don't want to say there's like so much that like goes into it, but there's a lot of pieces.
Yeah.
We had like deadlines and everything like that, and like coaching, you don't really have a ton of deadlines you have to like meet,
Yeah.
but like it was almost like being back in college. Like it was pretty thrilling. They're like, hey, like this is your assignment. You got to create a title, and like we need a title by like this day. So it's like okay, like thinking about a title. Okay, send in the title. I'm like living with it, and like they're gonna let you rock. Like they're not sitting there
Yeah.
and be like, oh, that title stinks, man. Go back and like
Yeah.
revise that. So like if it stinks, you're going up on stage
live
with
with
it
that.
stinking, right? Like so like so just thinking, like having that
Yeah.
guy to be like, all right, is this going to be a good title? Like, is this captivating? Is something I want to put my name on? And then like that deadline comes, boom, you send it in, and they're like, okay, cool. Hey, here's an example of something someone did last year in terms of how they broke down their presentation. You don't have to copy it, but go ahead and like do what you need to do. How you're going to
Yeah.
do yours. So like then sitting there like at my desk with like, okay, how do I want to break this down? How do you like you visualize it? How do you envision this going and everything like that? And like that was another part of it. So just like pretty much like all in all the process of getting there, I think that's the biggest takeaway because
Yeah.
and that might sound like cliche or anything, but I think with a lot of different things, we're just like, hey, like, I present on infield play. So like there's some staples in infield play or, anything in the game of baseball. But like at the end of the day, like the process, like you're teaching when you get up there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, so when you're teaching a crowd how you do something, they might know what you're talking about, right? So like how do you break it down to the atom, right? The most basic piece. Like how then do you explain that most basic piece, explain the terminology, explain everything else, like that process. So like, a really fun part for me and just kind of like my main takeaway is like, obviously you can't assume, what people know or don't know,
Yeah.
but you can help build people up to that in just a 30-minute presentation, right? So if you
Of
could do that in a
course.
30-minute presentation, like when you're in front of your players, like if you're, if you're not a coach and you're talking to people or anything like that, like it helped me learn just how to like overall be better at explaining my thoughts, my process, helped me be better at being able to visualize something and then like actually like create it.
Yeah.
For me, like that was the biggest takeaway I had from this process in all and everything like that, and like my presentation, because I'm like, it was all stuff that I knew, but like I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, somebody asked you like, hey, what do you believe in on the spot? Like, it's like, oh, okay, like, well, how, what? Like, you kind of like freeze up.
Yeah.
Like, oh wait, what do I
It's a
believe
deep
in? Like,
question.
yeah, it's like, what do you believe in? Like, if you ask somebody like, hey, describe me your approach, and they're a college player, like they're gonna be like all over the place with it until they've had that conversation over and over and over again. Like when you teach something, like yes, you're teaching it, but you're also teaching it like the need of the individual or like the need of the team. Very rarely do we take a step back and get to like look at everything, the bigger picture, and be like, okay, like if I got a player that is coming in from the outfield or pitching or coming from a foreign country that doesn't even know what baseball is, how do I take them from front to back and get them to understand everything in between, right? And like that was a major thing for me, and like how I'll continue to teach. I think it made me a better teacher, and it made me a better, on top of being, it made me a better presenter as well, just being able to like convey thoughts to people and everything. So that was my main takeaway, honestly, from the whole thing.
Awesome. Yeah, that seems like definitely a good experience for you. And obviously, everyone that you presented to, there were a lot of important takeaways. And I feel like for you now, you can step away and there are a lot of good lessons learned. And it's a lot of stuff that you can just take both professionally and personally.
Yeah.
But you said earlier that your goal at the end of 2025 was to present, right? So now that that goal is done, what is your new goal moving forward with within this field? Not necessarily like coaching goals. Obviously, you have your goals at Chestnut Hill and your team goals and stuff like that, but your individual goals as far as like ABCA presentations, maybe individual presentations for yourself. Like, have you set any new goals yet for yourself? Like, looking forward to end of 2026 or, whatever timeline that you have?
Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I have. Yeah, it's funny, kind of how I separated it. 2022, I sat down. I was like, hey, I'm gonna do these short-term goals. They're gonna be a 3-year window, and we'll see where it goes. From there. So that covered 23, 24, 25. So I still have some goals on that I still got to check off by the end of 25.
Yep.
Then I always set team goals and goals that I want to accomplish while being in the role I'm at Chestnut Hill, and just see where everything goes from there. So like I have those goals, and I have those short term goals. I have the long term goals and everything like that. But I didn't care what type of presentation it was, whether it was youth stage, main stage, and everything like that. I'm sure as I sit down, either at the end of this year or the summer or wherever I kind of want to write down new goals and everything, would definitely love to be on main stage at some point in my career. Doesn't have to be tomorrow. Something that maybe 10 years, 20 years down the road, I'll get to. But that'll be a career goal for me at that point in time. I think that'll probably be the new one. But as of now, I haven't really set anything relatively new for the most part.
So that's a goal that you hit, right? Mm-hmm. So we talked about previously, like when we talked about goal setting, I think that was the second episode, maybe
episode
third. But we talked about like goal setting and how both of us were kind of in the mindset like goal setting is important to a certain degree, but then the process is obviously the most important part of that. So it's like, yeah, great, you have a good goal, but like, what do you do with that? What's the process that you set from that? So you obviously reached your goal. Can you give people like just a quick blueprint as to how you broke that down? So like setting that goal, because that's like it's not like a metric based goal. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, I want to hit 350. Okay, right. Well, then you break it down. It's like, oh, I need to go 35 for 100 or whatever. Like you break it down into each minute detail. But For you, it was like, I want to present at this stage. And it's like, okay, great. So, how did you break that down to be able to, one, get the opportunity, and then two, like, put yourself in the shoes to go up there and present? Like, just because I feel like it's relevant to some of the conversations that we've had and like what we talked about with goal setting.
Yeah, so I mean, full disclosure, I think that goal came about December 2022. So
Mm-hmm.
right as I got that first opportunity to go to Nashville, do the
Yep.
hot stove, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to like swing it, make it work, and everything like that. So I had already established like a greeting with the ABCA at that point because I worked the youth clinic and everything like that.
Yep.
So I didn't know like this was something that was going to like come about and everything. So when that happened and I turned, I'm not able to do that in Nashville in 2023. What's it, yeah, 2022. So it would have been Nashville 2023 because it's in January. So I sat there and I was like, you know what would I even want from that experience, right? Like,
Yeah.
here I am turning down experience. Like, what would I want to gain from that experience were I to get it? And I was like, it'd be awesome to do a presentation, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it was almost like, hey, if I got to do a hot stove, that'd be like my intro. Like that'd be like my
Yeah. Yeah.
first
Yeah.
step, and like be like, all right,
Yep.
cool. And then my next step would be getting on stage. So when I set the goal, like the first part of that, and like why I was checked off was like, I was like, hey, I want to. First step of that goal was to, hey, I want to do a hot stove. I just want to do something
Yeah.
at the ABCA, have them like select me, do something there. So I was like, all right, cool. So when I got to the hot stove in 2024, I was like, boom, check. Like that's off. And then so like I was like, hey, but it'd be awesome in 2025 if I could do on something on stage. So like that was the second part of that goal and everything like that. So kind of the process of it. I mean, a lot of it's luck at the end of the day, I guess.
Yeah.
They deemed me. I don't want to say worthy because I mean who knows, but like they were like, hey, like you go up on stage
Yeah.
and do this. I'm like,
Go up. Yeah.
yes, yes, it's a goal of mine. Like I'll do that. So I think speaking to somebody that is setting goals or has goals and everything like that. Like if I don't have that relationship, maybe that goal doesn't come to fruition unless I'm well known in my profession, which you can ask somebody down the street, they don't even know who I am, right? So, like, I mean, right? So I mean, it's. I think we said it back in episode 2. Like, you also got to know like where you're at that point in time.
Yeah.
And so, like, I was kind of, like maybe they invited me to do something, so maybe this is something that can come to fruition at some point in time. So, yeah, I just kind of set it as a goal, and just the timing worked. Timing worked out. I mean, more lucky than anything, in my opinion. But like it's something that could have been on a 10-year and I get in 3, or 10-year I get in 8. Like it wouldn't have made a difference. Like they knew me at that point in time. So
Yeah. So this could be the last question, then we'll wrap up because you've given some good insight and information. But now back to the goal setting, and like we talked about the blueprint and you said you already had that relationship. Can you give any recommendation to people on how you can create that relationship? Like what's a piece of advice that you have to be like, maybe someone does have the aspiration, like I really want to be able to like spread my message. I really want to be able to like communicate. It doesn't necessarily need to be like ABCA specific, but like what's your piece of advice? Is like you said, I gained a connection which helped me get the hot stove, and then from there I was able to kind of gain trust, and they understood my skill set, and it's like, all right, now this other opportunity arose from that. What like piece of advice would you give like a young coach on, like, I guess finding that connection, building that connection? Like what's the recommendation there?
yeah, I mean, I think you just gotta be straightforward. Honestly, like if there's something that you want to accomplish, somebody you want to meet, someone you want to get connected with, like you got these things called phones at this point in time, right? So like, pick it up. Honestly, like
Yeah.
that coach probably has social media. That professional, that person probably has social media. There's probably some way you can kind of like reach them, any way possible. Like, and it's a humbling experience to get to that point too. Like, you might have to do things that you've never done before or you're uncomfortable with doing. Like, but you don't get that opportunity unless you put yourself in like in that space and everything like that. Like, huge music fan and everything like that. And like, you know, one of the cooler stories I heard as a kid is like how J. Cole gets signed to Jay-Z. Like, he's in the rain. He has his demo tape. He knows Jay works at this office. He sees him come out. He's like, take this CD, right? Like, he's pretty much like, he's giving self-promotion. He's out in the rain. This is like almost pre-social media at the time, but we're like pre-social media boom. So like, he's putting himself like physically in front of this person, like, take this. Like, I want to work for you. I want to work with you. You're my idol. And like, it took months before he had to gain a little bit more steam. And then it's like, oh yeah, that's that kid that, you know, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then he gets signed to Jay-Z, right? So it's like, but it's with anything else. Like, after the kids clinic, I met, you know, I'm sure he's okay with me saying this, but like Joe Mercadante, he's the head coach now at North Florida. He was at Pitt at the time. And, you know, after, I'm like, man, like, I want to get better at catching, like learning how catchers work. Like, here's this guy. Joe's probably one of the best catching coaches in the entire country. And like, the best piece of advice I got, and like, I didn't just create it out of my mind. Like, one of my mentors was like, just call him. I'm like, like that? I'm like, oh man, all right, cool. All right, I pick up the phone. I called Joe, and Joe's just like, yeah, I was surprised that you called me, but like, yeah, sure, like, let's talk. And like, we talked, and like, Joe and I, like, we see each other here and there. We'll say hello and everything like that. But like, it gained a connection for me. But like, was it uncomfortable? Yeah, I don't know Joe at the time, and I'm like, we're working this kids clinic together. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm gonna get this guy. He don't know it yet, but I'm gonna get this guy a call right after this. Like, so, I mean, that was uncomfortable for me at the time. But like, now it's like, anywhere I go, if I meet a coach, if I get their number somehow, some way, like, probably guarantee I'm giving you a call at some point in time. And like, just to pick your brain, like, you can turn me down. You can say like, I've gotten those. It's fine. It's not like I'm like, and yet again, knowing where you're at the point in time, like, I'm not looking to like go and work at, you know, insert SEC school, but like, I'm going to talk to that guy because like, he's in a position where I'm like, cool, like, his work gets scrutinized every single day, you know? So like, you can gain something from that. You can learn something from that person and everything like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be about like ascending the ladder, but it could be about accumulating knowledge, right? So like, put yourself in that space, be uncomfortable, call that person, text that person, get on social media. That's how you build a base. That's how you build a network. That's how you build a connection and everything.
Yeah, I think you put in a good PSA too about like the self-realization and like being honest with yourself. It's not like you were out here cold calling coaches. No. Like you had put yourself out there to meet coaches and then gave phone calls. So I feel like that too, like you said, just putting yourself out there to, once you make the first connection and you can kind of be like, hey, nice to meet you, and you have that, like, obviously, as long as they're willing, like, pick their brain and get the most out of it. I think that's a great piece of advice. I think there's a lot of good nuggets in this episode of like what you can take away and how you can, you know, use the ABCA convention to your advantage as a coach, and like how you can just excel your career in the coaching field overall. So thank you for sharing all that, because that's a real cool experience.
Absolutely, man.
Awesome. All right. Well, that does it for this episode. We'll catch you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in.
See you next time.
All right. Later.